There's tea and coffee and snacks. Please feel free to grab any. Hmm? We're good now? All right, guys. So, again, it's been 2 years under the shade of this beautiful surah. It's a surah that hinges upon Allah's statement to the angels, I will establish or appoint a trustee of mine on earth. And the job of that trustee is to honor the mandate of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to cultivate this earth for the purposes of the divine. Hence, the theme of Surah Al-Baqarah that we've selected, which is Imaratul Ard, or causing the earth to thrive. Our job is to cause this earth to thrive, not for our purposes, but for the purposes of the landlord himself. We're just tenants. We stay here temporarily. We do our job. We're supposed to be passing through. And the believer knows that he or she, their job is to keep the place as good as or even better than they found it, right? And so when we protect the environment, we do that not in any liberal or ideological or political sense, not even in a conservationist sense. We do it because this is our religious mandate. We are required to do that to honor Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we build, when we do urban development, when we farm land, when we build cities, when we build highways, when we allow for religious freedoms, when we build government and social institutions, the purpose is to pave the world for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and for the purposes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I said that Surah Al-Baqarah, again, is chapter 1 in both senses. In the historical sense, it was revealed after Al-Mutaffifin, which came down during Hijrah itself. So in that sense, Surah Al-Baqarah is surah number 1 in the Madani period. But in the Quran, it comes after the introduction or the prelude, which is Surah Al-Fatiha, which also makes it chapter 1 in the collection. And I said also before that cultivating this earth is a shared responsibility between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the sense that, if the cultivation of this earth is a battle and we are soldiers, the orders come from the general, so to speak. So the general or the politician or the leader says, this is what I want to do. And then we use our own resources in order to carry out that command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah gives the orders and we execute those orders. Both. So the end result is shared between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the human being uses his or her ingenuity, his or her resources, his or her wisdom and intelligence in order to do the work of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the best way possible, right? And so in America, for example, we have all these resources. Our job here is to educate. Our job here is to do advocacy, is to get involved in the political process, is to apply pressure. Our job is to alter culture itself, right? Using all the means that are available to us. In Gaza, they cultivate the earth in their own way by pushing back against tyranny and against the military occupation. And so the details of working out that mandate will vary from one place to the other depending on the circumstances and the situation. And that's why I always say, these are not blind orders. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I want you to clean up. And everyone cleans up in the way that is most suitable for their own circumstances. So again, Imaratul Ard, or causing the earth to thrive, is the theme of Surah Al-Baqarah, and that's the foundation. And we said that Surah Al-Baqarah is divided into 4 sections. We are almost at the end of section 3, which is the foundations of Imaratul Ard, the foundations of causing this earth to thrive. There are 2 foundations, Al-Ilmu wal-Mal, knowledge and wealth. And we've covered knowledge extensively, and we started some introductory remarks on the philosophy of wealth in Islam. And I wanted to recap that one more time before I get into ayah number 261. All right, so what are the principles of the Islamic financial system? All right. Let me ask you this question. When I say the economic system, what are some of the words that come to mind? The word capitalism comes to mind. Let's use financial words. What are the financial words that come to mind?
Money.
Interest, money, banks, supply and demand. What else? Profit and loss, GDP, GNP, stock market, portfolios, investment, brokerage, government bonds, right? Inflation, consumerism, LLCs, Fortune 500, S&P. These are the words that come to mind, right? What is the end? You can keep talking about financial instruments all you want. We can keep detailing all of this to the T. Recently, an investment opportunity was brought to my table. I've been in real estate for like 10 years. I thought I've seen everything. You know, Western capitalists, they will come with the most disingenuous ways to make money. It is absolutely amazing sometimes, right? So there's this company that is holding tons and tons of land for future subdivision development and things like that. But they have so much land and they don't have enough money to develop all this land. So it's a publicly traded company. I was talking to one of my brothers about this, yesterday. I was personally amazed by the proposal, just to see how the genius of making money. So instead of keeping all the land to themselves, they sell some of that land to an investor at a loss. But then they basically make it a requirement that that investor cannot resell the land to somebody else without their permission. So they become the first buyer. So they take your cash, and in 2 years they want to buy it back from you, just so that they show their shareholders that there are transactions and there are money going back and forth in the books. It's disingenuous. It's insane. Of course, people like me, we will gladly benefit from the process. We'll take their money. But the point is, the end goal of all of these financial instruments, everything that we've discussed, all these fancy words, what is the end goal of all of this? One word: profit. That's it. The end goal of the Western capitalist system is profitability. There's nothing else to it. Now, when did capitalism start? Is this idea ancient to humanity? No. Capitalism is a modern ideology. It started maybe like about 200 years ago, right? John Stuart Mill, and laissez-faire economics, all this stuff. This is like 200 years ago. Now, historically speaking, man attempted to get wealthy, right? We tried. We tried to work hard to make a lot of money, to have good retirement accounts and so forth. But what is the difference between the pre-modern and the post-modern type of wealth? Pre-modern wealth always had other goals. I want to make wealth in order to build a house and to protect my family and shelter my family. I want to build wealth in order to fight the enemy. I want to build wealth because, in winter, when it gets so cold, I'm not going to be able to farm my land, therefore I need to have reserves. When we fight a war, I need to have enough resources to protect my community. When I die, my kids need to have something so that they don't have to suffer or struggle. There were always something else that I needed the money for. But today, the modern capitalist mind, the goal of all things is what? Is money in and of itself. It's the accumulation of wealth in and of itself. It's profitability in and of itself. There's no other goal. I need to make money. Why? What do you mean why? There's no reason. I make money because I can, right? There's absolutely no end goal. You're going to make 10 million, you're going to ask yourself, why not 20? You're going to make 100 million, why not a billion? You're going to become a multi-billionaire, why not become the first trillionaire? Because there's absolutely no end in sight. I have to keep making money for the sake of making money. The Islamic financial philosophy is not like this. There has to be a goal to the accumulation of wealth. And if you don't have a goal to the accumulation of wealth, then we have a problem. All right? So, what is the philosophy of the Islamic financial system? Number one, true ownership of everything resides in the hands of God. We don't own anything, we just temporarily get to use those things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Right? Number two, wealth is not an end in and of itself. It is means to an end. And that end has to be compatible with the purposes of the divine. Remember, imaratul ard, we're supposed to cause this earth to thrive. And it can only thrive if the purposes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are fulfilled. Number three, short-term ownership rights are fully respected in Islam. So if you say, I own this house, I own this land, we respect that, even though we all understand tacitly that this is a temporary ownership, but that temporary ownership is respected. Number four, there has to be balance between individual and community interests. Islam is not a capitalist system that only focuses on individual self-financial interest, but it's not some kind of a communist socialist system either that deletes the uniqueness of the individual and puts everything in the hands of the government or the hands of society. Number five, there is a blanket prohibition on usury in Islam, on riba. Wealth cannot grow through unlawful means. Number six, solidarity between the members of a society is of paramount importance. So wealth cannot only be spent on oneself, it has to be spent on social institutions, has to be spent on mosques, it has to be spent on poor people, on orphanages, it has to be spent on projects that will help the destitute that live with you in the same society. Now here's the problem that happens, and I've alluded to this before. How many of you drove very energy inefficient cars? Extremely inefficient. Like you remember, like from the 1980s, like the Crown Victorias and the Caprice Classics and the real like 8-cylinder cars that would give you like 9 miles per gallon. Have you driven those before? I enjoyed driving those so much. Like when I was in my early college years, I had a Ford Country Squire. It was a massive car, and it barely gave me like $8 or $9 per gallon. Back then, when I was in college, I think in the Midwest, I think the gallon was probably about 40-50 cents, something like this. Good times. So we didn't really worry about gas efficiency. And over time, those cars have become more and more efficient. Now you're getting, out of an internal combustion engine, you're getting maybe 40 miles per gallon, on a good Civic, right? And then we decided to evolve altogether, and we came up with other types of cars. Now you have the hydrogen car, now you have the electric car, and the sky is the limit to the type of efficiency that we're trying to achieve, right? Now, would you or would you not agree with me that energy efficiency has its limitation until and unless we move into a completely new system? So let's say that you are using an internal combustion engine. I can take the engine of my Country Squire that used to give me 9 miles per gallon, and I can keep working on this engine, and I can keep adjusting it, and I can keep rewiring it, I can keep doing stuff to it in order for it to become more and more efficient. Right? So now it's 26 miles per gallon. That's an incredible feat from 9, right? And then I need to maybe lower the weight of the car a little bit, and then maybe use like smaller tires, and then maybe like just clean up certain things, and use different types of connections or whatever it is. People who love cars would know these details. Now I'm able to bring it up maybe to 35 miles per gallon, and by some act of God, I'm able to bring it up to maybe 40 miles per gallon. Would you agree with me or not that my effort, no matter what, has to be finite, because I will eventually reach some kind of a physical ceiling beyond which I will never be able to pass? Whereas an electric car, for example, will give you, a 300-mile range without using a single drop of gasoline. Okay? Can you somehow combine those concepts? Yes. They do that with the hybrid concept. which has both gas and it has the battery as well, right? In fact, the Chinese now developed this you know, they call it the F-150 killer. They have such high tariffs on those cars that you have to pay more than double the price of the car itself in order to bring it into the US, right? So the Mexicans have it, Canada has it. This is a truck that looks exactly like the F-150, and it's basically running on it's running on a battery, right? But it also has a 2-cylinder engine. So when you run out of juice, the 2-cylinder engine are basically producing electricity, right? Anyway, they keep coming up with these concepts, but the point is that if I wanted to take my old Ford Country Squire and I wanted to make this energy efficient, no matter what, there's going to be limitation. I need at some point or the other to decide, okay, I need to move to an electric car, or I need to move to a hydrogen car, or whatever. And by the way, it's been so many years now, I have not bought into the electric car hype yet. And it doesn't look like I will buy into that anytime soon, right? I know that some of you are, you know, rolling in your Teslas. I appreciate that. I'm not talking smack about you guys, but this is just another hype, like all the other hypes. It's a trendy thing, right? You know, people who can afford gas are the ones who can also afford electric cars. You know, they can afford to pay the $20,000 premium on those cars. But I'm not going to talk about this. I still admit that electric cars are cleaner, you know, compared to the internal combustion counterparts. But here's the thing. The Islamic financial system is the clean vehicle that emits no exhaust. And the Western capitalist system is the internal combustion engine. You can clean it up all you want, but you will always reach a ceiling no matter what. You have to replace the system with a new system altogether. So you can examine the Western system and you can come up with all kinds of ideas to make it fit into some type of an Islamic mold. But there will always ultimately be limitations. I understand as Muslims who live in a Western society, we have to grapple with the existing system and we have to find ways to keep it halal, so to speak. But just by observing that system and thinking that we can replace the Western banking system with an Islamic banking system, you're still using Western alphabet. There's still a limit. Replace government bonds with Islamic government bonds, you're still using the ABCs of the capitalist system. And as such, you are still limited by the very limitations of that capitalist system, right? A lot of people want to replace Western insurance with Sharia compliant insurance. Again, there's limitations to that. At some point or the other, you're going to hit the wall and you're going to run into something that's got to be haram, no matter what, right? I'm not advocating for some kind of a radical revolution, okay, even though maybe that's what the future has to bear for us. I am saying intellectually, I need to know that the purposes of the capitalist system and the purposes of the financial Islamic institution are mutually exclusive. Because the capitalist system has one goal and one goal only, and that is the profitability of the individual. Okay, let me rephrase. The profitability of those who are on top. They will let you have the crumbs that fall off the table, right? The purpose of the Islamic financial system is imaratul ard. Is cultivating this earth for the purposes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those two purposes cannot mix. They are mutually exclusive. What pleases God angers man, and what pleases man may anger God. All right? So in your minds, you have to understand that there are limitations to all of our attempts to subjugate the capitalist system to Islamic teachings. There will always be a limit to this. And ultimately, in the future, I think the Western capitalist system needs to be replaced with something else. I mean, it lasted 200, 250 years. I think at this point it's exhausting its limits. We've seen what the Western capitalism ultimately does, right? It makes the accumulation of wealth the end of all things. It makes it the ultimate goal of all things, right? Number two, it turns people against each other. It turns people against their own environment. Everything is now subjected to the accumulation of wealth. And it detaches man from his or her natural support system, from their families. You know, you see young people, they go to college, they graduate, and then they have to be gobbled up by corporations all around the country. Everyone lives by themselves, detached from, oh, my mom lives here, my dad lives there, I have an uncle here, I have a sibling there. The capitalist system has to cut people up into small pieces in order to utilize them and use them in the most efficient way possible, right? And ultimately, the capitalist system created this sort of like prison industrial complex where you're creating a system of modern day slavery where minorities who are serving in the prison system are being used as free labor in order to produce and to bring more goods and more commodities into the market. And I did not even talk about the mental health toll of all of this. Man is the wealthiest he or she has ever been, yet we are the absolute most miserable in our history. So the Islamic financial system needs a new operating system, right? And it's not capitalism that's going to cut it. The Islamic financial system's ultimate goal is imaratul ard, as I said, in a manner that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Western financial system's ultimate goal is profitability, period. Those two things are mutually exclusive. It's okay for me to profit as long as profitability is not the end goal. I profit to feed my kids. I profit to have a good retirement plan. I profit in order to support Gaza. I profit in order to do X, Y, or Z. It's got to be another goal. But I profit because profitability is the goal. Obviously, that is not accepted in the Islamic philosophy. So with that, let's get into the ethics of the Islamic financial practices, and we start with ayah number 261. Number one is al-infaq, to spend. Okay? Spend on good causes, spend on good projects, spend on good things, on deserving people, give in charity, give in zakah and sadaqah, support your local financial institutions, support your local businesses, support people that need your help. So look at the ayah, مثل الذين ينفقون أموالهم في سبيل الله كمثل حبة أنبتت سبع سنابل. The parable of those who spend their possessions for the sake of God is that of a grain out of which grew 7 ears. In every ear, 100 grains. I want you to imagine a scene where there's a beautiful, beautiful farmland, all wheat. Remember that scene from Gladiator? The very beginning of the movie when he's walking through the grain fields? Imagine the beauty of the thousands upon thousands upon thousands of acres of wheat, of grain, right? So the scenery is so important because when you look at, the parable is beautiful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that when you give, your charity is multiplied. Multiplied the way we put a grain in the earth, the grain grows into a full-fledged plant, and out of which, there's 7 ears of grain, and out of each ear there's 100 seeds. You see the exponential multiplicity, right? So there is a calculus to this that makes perfect sense. When I give the poor $1 in my record, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put it as 700 or whatever, as the Quran says, 700 folds, right? But then there is also something else. There's also the scenery itself. What comes to mind when you see like a beautiful field of grain? What are some of the ideas that come to your mind? Life, thriving, growth, beauty, power, impact, sustainability, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala paints a picture. He's not just telling you, give sadaqah and I will, if you do the math, I will multiply it by 700. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also saying, when you give your sadaqah, when you give your charity, you are nurturing the earth. You are causing the earth to thrive. You are cultivating this earth for me. You are doing my work. You are fulfilling my purposes, right? What are some of the avenues of spending fi sabilillah? Let's explore this for a second. When it says spend in the cause of God, what are some of the things that we can do in order to make that happen? Obviously, give your zakah and your sadaqah to the poor and the needy and the destitute and so forth. That's the most immediate one that comes to mind. Perhaps contribute to your masajid and to your institutions. But what else do we do? Sadaqah jariyah, maybe build schools and hospitals that will help people even after we leave this world. Very good. Water in Africa, of course. Digging water. You know, the Tarbiyah has a water well in our name, alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, in Sierra Leone, that I inaugurated myself with Allah's grace. It will continue to churn out beautiful water that will help farmers, inshallah, for years and years and years to come. What else? Exactly. Support orphans. Those orphans will grow, and every good thing that they do for the rest of their lives, inshallah, you're going to be like almost taking credit for that before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Help people get married. Young people, help them get married if they don't have the financial resources to get married. You know, put them on the right track. Scholarships that will help people go to great schools and benefit society and humanity. Yes? Sorry? Help old people, you know, senior citizens who don't have enough support, you know, for themselves. Yes?
My husband and I, we introduced to each other many men and women, and they married. And then when they're happy, they call us. But they're not happy. But they're happy, they say, we don't think about you. But we are not happy, we think about you.
You know, the Arabs have this say, you know, I'm an undertaker, but I cannot guarantee paradise. So they'll bury you, but they cannot guarantee paradise. But let me add a few things to this, right? When we support social institutions, when we support advocacy groups, when we push back against evil, right? When we fight Zionism, wouldn't that be something fi sabilillah as well? When you push back against a cancerous ideology, a supremacist ideology, an apartheid ideology, wouldn't that be also fi sabilillah, right? When you produce material that helps refine and clean culture, you know, culture where all the movies and all the soap operas and all the TV shows and all the songs, everything is filthy, everything is filled with language, with profanities, is filled with the objectification of women, absolute sickness across the board. Not only that, that's the tip of the iceberg, but deep inside the very philosophy of some of those songs and shows is that there's no God, you are fighting the world alone, everything is meaningless, everything is depressing, it's all just for nothing, right? That's the message that you get from a lot of movies. You know, a lot of the themes that, so wouldn't you agree with me that producing alternative art would be something fi sabilillah? Getting people excited and rebuilding hope in their hearts that there are still beautiful things to celebrate in the world. There are still clean things to cherish in the world. It's not all bad and dark, right? Just bringing hope back, you know, through alternative forms of art to humanity would also be fi sabilillah, right? Leads to the elevation of the individual. And all of that obviously will get you hasanat, but this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means. Spend, not just on yourself. If the end goal of the Islamic financial system is profitability, then we would only spend on ourselves. But because there is more to our system than that, you also have to spend on society as well in order to make your community. Again, you got to go back to the goal. The goal is imaratul ard. The goal is to cause our earth to thrive. And that is not going to happen if all I do with my wealth is spend it on myself. If nobody else gets benefit from what I make, then I am just becoming a closet capitalist without knowing. And that is really terrifying. Some scholars say that the ayah was revealed in the context of the Battle of Tabuk. And Tabuk, remember, happened way later in the Madani period. Because Uthman radiallahu anhu, when he realized that, you know, this battle is very difficult, it's happening in the summer, a lot of soldiers don't have enough equipment and so forth, so he took most of his wealth and he put it in the Prophet's lap, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And that's when Rasulullah prayed for Uthman, as in Bukhari, he prayed for Uthman radiallahu anhu, and he said, Allahumma inni raditu an Uthman farda'an. Lord, I am happy and content with Uthman, and I ask you to be content with him as well, right? This is the man that married two of his daughters, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So this idea of infaq, right, is highlighted here in this beautiful ayah. And if it's about Tabuk, then here's something else that I also have to mention for the purposes of full disclosure. I don't want to hold anything. What is Tabuk about? What is the Battle of Tabuk about? Pushing back against what? It was pushing back against the Romans, who tried to encroach the northern territory of the nation. All right? So the Prophet ﷺ had to mobilize this army. So if the ayah, according to some of the scholars, is about Uthman and Tabuk, then infaq, the idea of spending fi sabilillah, also involves what? Pushing back against evil. Directly pushing back against evil. You can sit here and be idealistic and talk all the time about building institutions and altering culture and changing the world to the better, and there's a cancer that is growing on the side. A cancer that is metastasizing and takes over everything. All your efforts are meaningless unless you put some chemotherapy into that thing. Unless you excise the tumor, all of your efforts are null and void. Because the tumor is going to take over all the good things that you're doing. It's like darkness that looms over everything. You thrive in the light, but what do you do about this darkness that is looming? You have to stop it first. So sometimes you need to be realistic about the world around you and see what can I do with my wealth to push back, against evil. And goodwill is not always enough. Goodwill is not always enough. All right? But here's the thing. Sometimes most people are having difficulty giving in the first place. Okay, and Surah Al-Baqarah will address that. Remember, we're talking about al-mal, wealth, and how to use it and how to spend it. Most people are having difficulty spending it because, shaitan, as the ayah will mention later, يَعِدُكُمُ الْفَقْرِ. Shaitan makes the idea of poverty so manifest in your eyes. Oh my God, if I gave, what am I going to do? I'm not going to have enough. My kids are going to suffer. What about my mortgage? What about my payments? Shaitan makes the idea of poverty and loss and deprivation so big in your eyes. All right? But some people who overcome this limitation, and now, mashallah, they are on the side of giving, once they have given, they start feeling better about themselves. And they start thinking, oh man, look at me. Alhamdulillah, I overcame that. I'm a good person. I did it. I gave my money to the poor. I gave my jacket to this young brother in the community that, doesn't have a jacket, cannot afford a jacket. Okay? And then I start going into what the Quran calls al-man. Al-man is when you start stressing your own benevolence. Is when you start boasting about your good deeds. Is when you start rubbing things in people's faces, right? So you see someone, wearing a nice jacket that you just gave him, the other day, and this person came to like a dinner at your house. Oh, mashallah, look at you, you're wearing the jacket that I gave you last week. So good on you. Don't you guys agree? I gave him that jacket. There's always, every family has someone that does this. Every family has someone that does this. They will boast about everything. And then they will come to the masjid. They will walk with their kids. Do you guys see, see the beautiful shoe shelves over there? I bought that. I saw it with my own eyes, right? Loudly. And he makes sure that other people hear him too. Or people that require you, it's okay to recognize people when they give, by the way. There's nothing wrong with that. And we're going to talk about privacy versus giving sadaqah in private versus public, also a little bit later. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. We're going to address that, okay? But what I'm trying to say here is that requesting that recognition is considered haram, because this is man. And man is when you desire to boast about the good things that you've given and rub it in people's faces as well, hurting them. Come on, man, you've helped me. Why do you have to keep reminding me, right? You've done it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why do you have to keep saying it, right? So this is the second ethic that we learn about spending, and that is we're not supposed to practice man. In fact, and this is ayah number 262, الذين ينفقون أموالهم في سبيل الله ثم لا يتبعون ما أنفقوا منا ولا أذى. Those who spend their possessions for the sake of God and do not thereafter mar or taint their spending by basically, rubbing it in other people's faces and by boasting about it. Right? And that ends up just hurting people's feelings. And when you hurt people's feelings, that is contrary to the spirit of Imaratul Ard. Because we're supposed to be working with each other as a team. The strong helps the weak and so on and so forth. Now you're doing the opposite. Here's a hadith, by the way, that is really important. ثلاثة لا يدخلون الجنة. There are three that will not enter Jannah. العاق لوالديه, someone that is dishonoring to their parents, that hurts their parents. وَالْمُدْمِنُ الْخَمْرِ, someone that is addicted to an intoxicant. This is so serious, right? And al-mannan, the one that keeps boasting about their acts of sadaqah and acts of charity. And the other hadith, ثلاث لا ينظر الله إليهم يوم القيامة. There are three that Allah will never look at on the day of judgment. This is really interesting, the continuation of the same one. العاق لوالديه, obviously someone that dishonors or hurts their parents. And get this, right? These two. وَالْمَرْأَةُ الْمُتَرَجِّلَةُ, a woman that acts in a masculine way. وَالرَّجُلُ الدَّيُوث, and a man that does not have ghira. There's ghayrat, right? In Farsi. I don't know if the Urdu speakers have this word as well, right? Ghira? Ghira, right? And so the word ghira means that you naturally feel protective of women in your family. You feel protective about your wife, about your daughter, about your mom, right? You don't want people to see the aura of the women in your family. It's a natural, protective, manly response. People who flaunt their naked wives and take them to parties and take pictures with them, that's the very definition of the youth. These effeminate men that have no honor and they have no dignity, right? If you meet a guy like this, that is not a little bit jealous, a guy that doesn't tell you, hey, you can't go out like this. A guy that has a little bit of fire in his blood, don't marry this guy. My single sisters, right? Black mark on this guy. This is off the list, all right? So the type of charity that is followed by boasting does not build communities. It does not build society. It does not do imaratul ard. It is, as the ayah says, adha. It's harm. All right? One of the brothers once requested to give a certain amount. That was at the Salam days before we started Tarbiyah. He requested a plaque, like a marble plaque for his donation to be placed on the classroom. And we said it's fine. We figured he wants to do that for his kids or his family or whatever, to kind of build the spirit of charity. That was honestly what I thought. And then, this brother invited all of his co-workers. He works for for a company. He invited all of his co-workers, like this 25 of these non-Muslims, and they came in order to take pictures of him next to the plaque. Okay? That was disturbing in and of itself, but that's not the problem. The problem is that when he arrived and he looked at the plaque and he was so upset. I was like, what? He said, this is too small. I thought it was going to be like, this number of feet by that number of feet. That's the standard. This is too small. If I take a picture next to this one, my name is not gonna be clear enough. That's his problem. That's when you know right away that they don't give for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or their masjid or the cause that they are claiming to support, but rather there's just some kind of self-interest still. Right? And that is definitely very problematic. 264, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says here, يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تبطلوا صدقاتكم بالمن والأذى. O you who believe, do not deprive your charity of all worth by stressing your own benevolence and hurting the feelings of the needy. Subhanallah. And this ayah provides a beautiful metaphor for the concept of men. All right? So, I live in Loomis. Loomis Granite Bay, they are known to have, well, a lot of granite, right? Folsom, I think, also has a lot of, like, everyone's backyard has all these rocks, all these stones. It's very difficult to grow any plants because you have to do a lot of digging and you have to remove a lot of rocks. All right? But sometimes if you don't want to plant like really big trees, and you just like have like maybe small plants or whatever, small vegetables, whatever, stuff for the kitchen table. If there is enough layer of soil on the rocks, it would still work, right? But if that layer of soil is so thin and rain comes down, what's going to happen? It's going to clean it up and wash all the soil, and all that remains is the rocks. So see what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says here, right? فَمَثَلُهُ كَمَثَلِ صَفْوَانٍ عَلَيْهِ تُرَابٍ. The parable of the person that does a lot of man, that rubs his charity in people's faces, is like land that has rocks and there's a very thin layer of soil on that rock, right? فَأَصَابَهُ وَابِلٌ فَتَرَكَهُ صَلْدًا. Once the drops of rain came down, it washed all the soil and left it bare. You cannot plant anything on bare rocks, right? Subhanallah. Now, look at the next ayah, 265. وَمَثَلُ الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ وَتَثْبِيتًا مِنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ كَمَثَلِ جَنَّةٍ بِرَبْوَةٍ. Now, the parable of the people who are the exact opposite, who give for the right reasons, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their example is that of a beautiful garden on top of the hill. أصابها وابل فآتت أكلها ضعفين. Because there is enough thick layer of soil, when the rain came down, it did what? It actually yielded double what it would have yielded naturally. Because that's when rain works. If the layer is very thin, the rain will wash off the soil. But if the layer is thick enough, the rain will actually nurture that soil, and then that soil will yield. فَإِن لَمْ يُصِبْهَا وَابِلٌ فَطَلٌّ. Even if a lot of rain did not come down and it was just a drizzle, plants will still grow. So this is the difference between giving in charity for the wrong reasons and giving in charity for the right reasons. Now look at 267. Has an interesting perspective here that I wanted to share with you. يا أيها الذين آمنوا أنفقوا مما كسبتم ومما أخرجنا لكم من الأرض. O you who believe, spend on others out of the good things which we have given you, that you have acquired, and out of that which we bring forth for you from the earth. What comes from the earth? Crops. That's the first thing that comes to mind. But what else comes from the earth? Minerals. That's so important. There is zakah on that as well. What else comes from the earth?
Water.
All of that would be considered minerals. There's something else that comes from the earth that is liable for zakah. Gold?
Water.
Yeah, that would all be considered minerals. Water, there's no taxation on that because water is just used to plant your crop. So you will pay zakah on the crop, not on water. Treasures. Some people would, that doesn't happen as much in our time, but sometimes people would basically have treasures that are hidden under the earth. So if you came along and you found, whatever, like, people in Egypt, for example, they discover artifacts from the time of the pharaohs. Even that there is zakah for this, per the letter of Islamic law, right? First, let me ask you, what is the zakah on crop? Like if you have farmland, brothers here, they have, mashallah, they have farmland up north in Yuba City, walnut, peaches, whatever. What's the zakah on farmland? You need to know these things. Some of you might actually invest in farmland. Who is the biggest farmer in the United States? Bill Gates. Bill Gates owns more farmland in this country than anyone. Who is the second biggest farmer in the United States? Oprah Winfrey. I know it's shocking. You know, when you think of like fallah, when you think of farmer, you think of simple people, right? You know, just rough on the edges, right? You think of immigrants, you think of Mexicans, right? You think of Indians, right? Those are the two top farmers in the United States. They produce most of the food that you eat, all right? So investing in farmland in the U.S. is always a lucrative undertaking. Now, if maybe some of you will invest in farmland, I strongly recommend it. But there is a tax on this. There's a zakah on it. Now, if you use machinery, your share of zakah is 5%. But if you use machinery, and that includes like, you know, irrigation water, you know, anything that involves machinery. But if you are literally farming your land and you're just using rain, nothing else, or you're using like, you know, water wells that are, you know, constantly yielding without a pump, in fiqh, you give 10% and not 5% on that. Just, you know, note for the wise. All right, so zakah on crop is 5 or 10, depending on whether machinery is used or not, right? What about zakah on minerals? What if you live in Texas and mashallah you're one of those people, it's just oil sprouted out in your backyard, which by the way happened to a few brothers. You know, your zakah is actually quite big, you know, that is 20%. So 1/5 of the yield goes to zakah because there's absolutely no effort on your part. It was just entirely God's gift. Zakah on treasures that come out of the earth, the scholars made a distinction. If that treasure is ancient and it was just found or discovered in Muslim land, like let's say you're in Egypt or Iraq and you found like a Mesopotamian you know, artifact or something, then you know you basically have to give you know the 1/5 of that, just like minerals. But if this is conquered land, you know, let's say that you know, mashallah, the Syrian brothers and sisters who conquered Damascus, and they found all the you know, all the artifacts and all the wealth and all the beautiful Monet portraits in the houses of Bashar al-Assad. What is that considered? It's considered a spoil of war. It's all yours. There's no zakah on that, right? So it's interesting that you examine, you know, these perspectives of fiqh. You know, it's really beautiful stuff. 268. Ash-shaytan ya'idukum al-faqr. Shaitan blows out of proportion the idea of poverty. Oh my God, you're going to lose so much. $5,000, dude. How much do you make? Take it easy, okay? Next year, inshallah, you give 5,000. This year, make it 500. I have bills, I have kids to feed, I have a family, I have expenses. This is what shaitan promises you. But in return, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also promises you something. What does He promise? Allah promises two things, as the ayah number 268 says, وَاللَّهُ يَعِدُكُمْ مَغْفِرَةً مِّنْهُ وَفَضْلٍ. Allah promises two things. Shaitan promises you poverty, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises two things, and those are maghfirah, forgiveness. Because forgiveness is the one obstacle that is between me and what? And Jannah. And Jannah is really all I need. It's all I want. There's nothing on this earth that Allah can promise that would be greater than Jannah anyway. That's why people are so small-minded sometimes. They pray for wealth, they pray for a car, they pray for a degree, they pray for a job. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just laughing at them. I can give you 1,000,000 times more. So if my child came to me and said, you know, we are at the checkout aisle at Safeway, and then they saw candy at the checkout aisle and they said, Dad, I want this. And then they throw tantrums. No, I will bake you a really amazing cake at home. No, I want this. And they're throwing a tantrum, and then you just said no, because it is your intention to do what? To give them something much better a little bit later. That would not be like out of the ordinary. We parents do that all the time. Sometimes we throw tantrums and we want an immediate response from God, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in His plan, He has Jannah for you, which is 1,000,000 times bigger than anything you could ever ask for in the life of this world. So don't be fooled. So the Quran is so balanced. Allah doesn't say, shaitan promises you poverty, but I will promise you wealth. No. Because then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is playing shaitan's game. They're both using dunya now as an incentive. That's not what Allah does. He's very clear. Shaitan promises you deprivation in this dunya, but I promise you what? Maghfirah. And maghfirah is forgiveness so that you earn the one thing that I can give you that is bigger than anything else. Right? But I know you guys and I know your small-mindedness. You still want your immediate rewards, right? You still want your instant gratification. Fine, I'll give you a little bit of that too. And that's why he says, وَفَضْلًا. I give you a little bit more. And a little bit more is basically everything that we enjoy right here in this dunya. See? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to you in the most poignant way. And now 271 talks to us about another ethic, which is whether or not we should advertise our giving. إن تبدوا الصدقات فنعما هي وإن تخفوها وتؤتوها الفقراء فهو خير لكم. Allah says, if you do your deeds of charity openly, it is very well. It is a beautiful thing. But if you bestow it upon the needy in secret, it will even be better for you. So the scholars have debated this a lot. Because this is, think of sadaqah as any act of worship. So which is better, for me to recite the Quran by myself or to recite the Quran beautifully so that other people are inspired by the Quran? Which one is better? See, it's not an easy question. Because there's a case for either. Someone might say, well, when I recite the Quran between me and Allah, there's more ikhlas, I will be closer to God. You know, it will mean more to me. But when I recite the Quran publicly, I'm inspiring other people and they love the Quran and they're excited about the Quran. There's a case to be made. Which is better, to pray tahajjud by myself or to pray jama'ah for Salatul Isha at the masjid? Do you see, like, both are good in their own right. Sadaqah is the same exact way, right? When we give in charity, sometimes it's good to do it publicly and sometimes it's good to do it privately, as long as you are intentional and you know what you're doing. Now, some of the scholars, and you know, Imam al-Hasan al-Basri, for example, is in that school. He says that in general, if we were to choose, do your zakah publicly, because zakah is mandatory, and do your other acts of charity, your sadaqat, do them privately. But again, he said there is not a single sahih hadith that says one or is better than the other. It's all about your niyyah. 272 is also important. So after Hijrah, for the longest time, the Prophet ﷺ was giving the charity of the Muslims, sadaqah and zakah, to everyone that is in need. The Muslims, the Jews, the mushrikeen, everyone that is poor was getting it. And then the number of Muslims increased. So gradually, when the Jews and some of the non-Muslims are coming and asking for charity, the Muslims started telling them, sorry, we cannot give you, it's just for the Muslims. Even Asma radiallahu anha, Asma bint Abi Bakr as-Siddiq, she stopped giving charity to her grandfather Abu Quhafa, Abu Bakr's father, because he was not Muslim. So she stopped giving him. All right. When she saw that Rasulullah stopped giving sadaqah to the non-Muslims, she stopped as well. So a lot of Sahaba stopped giving sadaqah until 272 was revealed. So Ibn Abi Hatim narrates from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, after this ayah, Rasulullah started giving to everyone again. Because the ayah says, لَيْسَ عَلَيْكَ هُدَاهُمْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. It is not your job to guide them, it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that guides whomever He wills. In other words, give sadaqah to everyone and support everyone, and quite honestly, when you think about it, this is more in line with imaratul ard. I am fixing this earth. I have to pave highways. I have to feed the hungry. I have to build schools and hospitals. You know, I have to make sure that everyone is okay and everyone feels the presence of Islam. If I confine that to the Muslims, then I'm not doing imaratul ard. I'm not really cultivating the earth for Islam. I am just, you know, being selective of who is the recipient of my charity. Of course, a lot of Muslim scholars, by the way, they say that zakah in particular must be given exclusively to Muslims. So you will see variations in opinions on this particular matter. But again, if you understand the theme of Surah Al-Baqarah, I think you will think differently, on this matter. Another ethic that needs to be in mind before we give is at-tathbit. If you look back at ayah, right, which one is it? 265. ومثل الذين ينفقون أموالهم ابتغاء مرضات الله وتثبيتا من أنفسهم. Tathbit is verification. Tathbit is verification, corroboration. So an additional ethic when you give your charity is, we're not talking here about verifying whether the person is actually deserving of zakah or not. Because a lot of people, for example, they come to the masjid and they apply, and we usually take their word for it. Sometimes we ask for tax returns, but most of the time we just give. If someone says, I need $300 for my rent, we usually just help them with that, and we leave the matter to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what if you know for sure that there's someone out there that deserves zakah, and that person is just so dignified and doesn't want to ask for help? You see the difference between those two? So you're not going randomly trying to verify every applicant of zakah. Rather, you are going out and recruiting people that you know zakah would really go a long way in their hands. And they're just way too proud to say anything. Look at the ayah. Really is beautiful, ayah number 273. للفقراء الذين أحصروا في سبيل الله لا يستطيعون ضربا في الأرض يحسبهم الجاهل أغنياء من التعفف تعرفهم بسيماهم لا يسألون الناس إلحافا. Give to the needy who, being wrapped up in God's cause, are unable to go about the earth in search for livelihood. People who are public servants, people that were soldiers in the army, people that fought the jihad wars with the Prophet ﷺ, people that were guards, people that just had duties. They don't have time to run shops and do trade and travel for business. So they're very, very poor, but they have a job to do. And because of that job and how much they believe in that job, they are unable to serve, to make money beyond that. So much so that people who are unaware of them might think that they are wealthy because of how dignified they are. They have way too much dignity to come and ask for help and support. يحسبهم الجاهل أغنياء من التعفف تعرفهم بسيماهم لا يسألون الناس إلحافا. They don't incessantly ask for money. The word for a bed cover in Arabic, one of the words for bed cover is what? Lihaf. Lihaf is your bed cover because it covers all of you. So when someone comes and overwhelms you with questions and incessant requests for money every single day, they call it ilhafa. They ask too much, right? يسألون الناس إلحاف. So they are not that type. They never ask for wealth. They never ask for money incessantly. But you know who they are. تعرفهم بسيماهم. You know them. So one of the ethics of charity is that we exert effort as a community to go and find those people. Identify them. If you know there's a really hard-working single mother and she's supporting 3 kids and she's proud to come and ask for zakah, wallahi, some of them, they come to my office. And I offer them, sister, we can give you some help. And she's like, I cannot accept sadaqah. I'm healthy, I can work. Find me a job. I don't want charity. I think we need to find a way to maybe give those people $500, $1,000, a couple of $1,000, get them started with something. Help them with a small business and get them started. Make that the seed upon which they build. Identifying those people will be healthy for the community. It's healthy for society. It is a true act of imaratul ard. Inshallah ta'ala, next time we will start talking about another aspect of the Islamic financial philosophy, which is combating riba, going against usury, and what usury means, and what usury does to society, and how it's extremely harmful because it erodes the very asset of wealth itself. So inshallah we're going to address that next time. Meanwhile, it's 12:41, and I'll take some of your questions, inshallah. Please.
What would be halal investment options from Islamic perspective?
I mean, anything that is not that does not deal with haram is considered halal. So by default, assume that it is halal. So you just have to ask yourself, okay, let's take stock for example.
Yeah.
Let's take the stock for example. You know, I have a small portfolio, and it's not, unless you are a dedicated day or week trader. I think they call them week traders now. Not weak as in not strong, but week as in every week, right? And so if you are, you have to be really dedicated to the stock market, and you have to know your stuff. You got to get up at 4:30 in the morning and be on your computer looking at the stock exchange. If you're not this person, I strongly recommend that you reduce your stock portfolio to maybe less than 5% of your income. And unless you are this guy that invests every single day and knows the ins and the outs, always invest and be ready to lose all of your money. Whatever you put in the stock market, you should feel comfortably going to sleep knowing that you're going to lose the very last dollar. Okay? If you're this kind of person, then it's okay to invest. This is really my little financial advice to you. Okay? Even though, you know, people ask the imams all kinds of weird things, so I have to be prepared. But if you're asking me about the specifics of investing, okay, you need to, for example, contact Amana Mutual Funds. It's a portfolio. All they invest is halal companies, and so they avoid alcohol. They avoid weaponry. They avoid like they don't invest in Lockheed Martin, for example, right? They will avoid the porn industry. They will avoid the movie industry. They will avoid anything that could even potentially be haram. There's another one, by the way, that I've put some money in the past. It's called the Washington Mutual portfolio. And Washington Mutual is what the Jews and the Mormons and the Amish and the Jehovah's Witness, and many Muslims, they put their money in Washington Mutual as well, because it's very, very clean. So if you invest in the stock market, you have to be very careful what you're investing in. Real estate, for example, maybe it's a third or the fourth time last week. I get an opportunity, and that opportunity is a retail plaza, fully occupied, perfect. Man and his wife, they're having a divorce, and they are like killing each other in court. And that brings the value of the property down. So, we measure the viability of a commercial real estate opportunity by something that is called, cap ratio or cap rate. The cap rate of that property was like about 12%, which is very, very high. Okay? So I went and I drove by. I'm telling you, this is the fourth time this happened to me. I drove by and I realized that there is a liquor store as one of the 5 tenants. It was perfect, except for that one thing. Exactly, right? Well, they have like a 10-year lease. I mean, liquor stores, those are your best leases. Those are your most stable leases. Anything that thrives on vice, that thrives on filth, that thrives on the exploitation of people is the one thing that grows in this country. Right? It's the one thing that becomes most successful in this country. So I walked, and then the broker was like, I don't understand what you're doing. He's like, I cannot invest in something that involves alcohol. He says, like, you're just a landlord. You're not dealing with alcohol. It's like, no, I am directly contributing to harming society by allowing one of my tenants to be selling this filth, right? I can't, in our faith, we cannot do something like this. So you have to be careful and ask all the questions and get to the nitty-gritty. And once you have excluded the things that are haram, pretty much everything else is halal. You don't have to worry about it.
Too many options would be as halal. Would that be fair to say, correct to say?
I don't think so. I think there's so many options that are halal. There's so many options, and that's why I've always done real estate, because I think real estate is one of the cleanest ways to make money in this country. So I strongly recommend that you consider dabbling a little bit in real estate. Any other questions, guys? Yes, sister. Some of what? Uh-huh.
Like donate, yada yada, but then they would like tell people the name of the person that donated. Is that one of the things that you're talking about that's public and private?
So it depends. If that person requested for their name to be mentioned because they want to be recognized and they want to feel gratified, then that would definitely be questionable. But if they just out of appreciation and admiration mention that person's name to encourage other people, then there's nothing wrong with it. It's really about what's in the heart at the end of the day. So sometimes I've donated publicly because you have to lead by example, and sometimes you donate privately. Maybe what you donate privately is a lot more than what you donate publicly, and so forth. It's about what's in the heart. Yeah. Yep. Yes.
The jizya, was that an equivalent of zakah for the non-Muslims?
I think, according to the Shafi'is, maybe. But most of the scholars said that jizya is the tax for exemption from the army. Because non-Muslims were not required, they were not drafted to the army. So we will offer you protection. Other Muslim soldiers, they will have to fight, they put their lives on the line, but you are sitting at home with your mom, then naturally we have to collect that extra money, in return for protection, because you don't have to be drafted in the army. So I think that is the strongest opinion.
For only those that are
Sorry?
For only those that are capable of going to battle.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Or old or sick.
Exactly. Jizya is only for adult males in the age of fighting. Yeah. In the majority of the scholars who believe that it has to do with military service. Yes.
In the beginning, you were talking about the individual versus the society. In Islam, at least from the Surah, if someone has a property and it's not dynamically being invested and flourishing and thriving, right?
Mm-hmm.
Umar radiallahu anhu went to Bilal. He had a land that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave him, right? And he found the land untouched.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, either you take care of it and you grow stuff in it, or you invest in it, right?
Or we're going to tax you.
No, we're going to take it away. Or you say, hey, I can't take care of it. Show me the portion that you want to take care of it, and I will figure out and check it.
Right.
And if the rest, I will take it back to the house, Beit al-Mal. Right? So the individual property is not left to you to keep it, static. You have to be actively making imara even for that property.
Right. Right.
So this is very distinct in
Mhm.
Islam. You can't find it in any other place.
Mm.
If someone has a wealth and he doesn't want to touch it, or an investment, or dead money, right? Not active.
Sure.
No other religion, no other system asks you anything except in Islam.
Actually, this is a really important point. And I think Brother Shamir is alluding to the grand purposes of charity in general. You might think that the purpose of charity is the direct help of the poor person that receives your charity. When in reality, I think this is like maybe 5 or 10%. But 90% of the purpose of charity is to ignite the engine of the economy. Why? Because charity or zakah is only liable on wealth that is not being invested. Wealth that is stagnant, that is sitting in the bank somewhere. And a form of that wealth, as the example that the brother gave, is land or maybe a real estate that is not used. So here's the thing, and this is going to sound ironic to you. Let's say that you own an investment home and you keep some money in that home, right? If that home has a tenant and you're collecting rent, then the asset itself is not liable for zakah. But if the home is sitting and 1 year has passed, the entire asset becomes liable. You see how serious that is? There's a massive discrepancy between your liabilities. So that encourages you to in order to avoid paying zakah, what are you going to do? you're going to have to find a tenant, right? Same with gold, for example, except for Abu Hanifa. All the scholars say that if a woman wears her gold at least once a year, then her gold is meant for zina. Yeah, it's meant for, embellishment or decoration. It is not meant for investment. But if you buy gold with the intention of investing it, so it's, you're keeping it in a safety deposit box, then that gold becomes what? It becomes liable. Now, so the point here is that my wealth benefits me and it benefits society as well. It's being moved. And as it moves, it produces jobs, it creates employment, it creates opportunities, it injects some goodness in the economy in which you live. So thank you for reminding us of this. This is a really important point. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
That's part of it. The other point, I think you beautifully put it, just trying to understand if I get it well. The believers that give charity, right, are different levels.
Mm.
There is, like you said, the worst case where they give something to feel good about themselves and then rub it in the face of the ones that beneficiaries of that charity, etc. And then you have those that are trying to contribute to the society, feel good about being a good Muslim citizen, right? And then there is a category of those that are doing a transaction with Allah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give this. Right?
Give me that.
Give me that.
Mm.
And I'll put barakah in my life and, hey, help my kids get into the school or whatever it is. And then the elevation goes in higher and higher. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically interacting with you at your level of thinking, وَمَا قَدَرَ اللَّهَ حَقَّ قَدْرِهِ, at your thinking or your understanding of your relationship with Him.
Right.
So Allah tells you, hey, don't get in here, don't get in here, don't get in here, right? But beyond here, I'm there for you.
Right.
So that transaction is not the actual goal. It's what type of transaction, what's the quality of your transaction that you want to have with Allah. So I think you beautifully put it. I just wanted to see if
No, Jazakallah khair. This is a fair rephrasing of what I'm saying. And sometimes it's also healthy for us to move from one level to a higher level, because you're not going to make it all the way right away. So if we can get you to stop rubbing it in people's faces, but you still want a little bit of recognition, okay, that's better than not giving at all. And then now you're giving with recognition, then maybe after that, I don't care about recognition as long as I get what I want from God, right? It's okay for us to take you to that level. And then after that, you do it because all you really want is not even Jannah. What you want is that partnership with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you just feel it's the right thing to do regardless. Yes?
Dealing with finances and money now, I think it's such an important topic, and I think it's extremely important for all of us that we be learning about it, because we focus a lot more on how we can increase our wealth, but without having, just like anything else in Islam, you get to know the rulings on it, and because otherwise it can become your own worst enemy. If you have this huge blessing or whatever size blessing it is, and then you might misuse it or not, or people might have a right in it that you do not give away. I'm surprised, and honestly, I didn't know a lot about this, but just the literacy of zakat and what's required to give away, I think is something we don't focus enough on. And we're focusing a lot more on what we want to collect or want to gather or want to give to our families, which is important. So I think it's just important that we discuss this more. And it's just surprising, and I was one of those, and I'm still trying to learn just how many people might not know about it. Like growing up
Mm.
which, is not really true in many ways.
Agreed. I was once attending a lecture that Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali was delivering, alayhi rahmatullah. You know, I think Egyptians definitely know Sheikh Ghazali, but I think North Africans, the Algerians and the Tunisians, they also know Sheikh Ghazali because his presence, he lived in Algeria for a number of years, and his presence was really like, it brought, a certain type of revival of Islam, especially to the Algerians. And so, I lived in the Middle East, in that era, and anytime Sheikh Ghazali would give a lecture, we were like, I was in high school, and we would run, and there'd be like, so many people out the door, standing outside because the auditorium is completely full. And so one of those days, I managed to make it inside, and I sat, in the first row because I arrived very early. And to everyone's shock, half an hour into Sheikh Ghazali's lecture, Sheikh Qaradawi, also passed away, alayhi rahmatullah, he walks into the auditorium in order to listen to the lecture. So, Sheikh Ghazali stood up and he went down and he held him from his hand and he said, "You have to sit right next to me on the podium." And he said, "No, I'm here to learn from you." And he said, "No, I swear, I'm not going to say anything unless you come sit next to me." So he had Sheikh Qaradawi sit next to him. And then he said this, "I have been making dua for Sheikh Qaradawi in every sajda, for the last year or so, because a year earlier, Sheikh Qaradawi published what I think is his most seminal work, his most important book, which was called?" No. That was way early in his career. That was when he was young. Fiqh al-Zakah. This was a modern day investigation of all the modern applications of zakah today. It's a 2-volume text, absolutely indispensable in any Muslim household that truly wants to understand its financial obligations to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Sheikh Ghazali said, "Wallahi, if Sheikh Qaradawi met Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with nothing but fiqh al-zakah, it would be enough for him to be saved." What you're saying is absolutely true. This is such a fundamental thing for us Muslims, yet it gets the least amount of attention. We talk about spirituality, we talk about tazkiyah, we talk about all the ibadat, we talk about fasting, we talk about the rituals of Hajj, all of this. But the one thing that gets the least amount of attention in our conversations is the financial stuff. So, download Fiqh al-Zakah is actually available online as a PDF. Search for it, download it, read it. You will be mind-boggled by the amount of depth and detail that Islamic law went into in order to ensure financial rights and financial growth in Muslim society. It's absolutely astounding.
I think the brother is asking not just for a reference, he's asking for maybe a program or plan where we go through the pillars.
So there's more work for me, basically.
That's what I interpreted.
No, jazakallah khair.
And I think, I honestly believe 100%, as the brother is saying, that I know for sure, because people come and ask me, like I ask you, so sometimes I come to you, but there are even transactions that people think that they are Islamically okay, but they are not, right? So people are committing, sins by, I would say by ignorance, right? And that's where the role of, the scholars, and not necessarily you, we may bring, a brother to just,
Right.
for a weekend, like we did with other brothers, is to come and talk about zakah. Okay? It is when you have these multiple payments, right? What is halal, what is not? What's case in here? What's case not? And it's really fundamental to a daily interaction between Muslims and the society and their obligations and stuff and their rights.
Agreed.
Right? And that is, I see it, and people ask me this, and I tell them, well, what are you doing?
Yeah.
That's not halal, at least for, the Maliki and this and that. You go and ask.
So what you see, this is beyond zakah. We're talking about like financial transactions in general.
It's all of
Right.
it. And zakat is
Right.
obviously important, but it's all of it. And I think we have to bring a plan or programs to cover this
Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen.
Teaching people Quran. There is nothing better in this world. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there is no worship better than the recitation of Quran.
Mm.
No worship. And no one will intercede in the day of judgment better than Quran. Not even prophets or angels.
Mm.
So I know you're
No,
right.
Jazakallah khair. Da'awatak, inshallah. Da'awatak. No, I agree, and I think more of that needs to happen. We're having really the event on the 31st, inshallah, is going to address a lot of these financial questions, but a particular aspect of it, which has to do with retirement and wills and living trusts and passing on wealth to heirs and stuff like that. That's what the event that Brother Shak is putting together. Sheikh Omar Khan from Southern California, he is a financial advisor by profession. We are building a good connection with Joe Bradford as well, who has really dedicated his entire career at this point to Islamic financial transactions and so forth. A couple of years ago, I actually discovered that a lot of youth in our community are investing in drop shipping. You guys heard the concept? So they would have. It took me a while. It took me a few months to catch on and understand what they were doing. Like even my son, made a lot of money from these things. And I'm not paying attention. So what they do is that they create like an online storefront, and that storefront has certain items, and people buy those items, and when they buy it, that's when they contact the supplier in China and then get the item and have it shipped. So basically, those kids, they did not take possession of those goods, and they were selling something that is not theirs. I was like, wait a second, this sounds like bay'ul gharar. This is haram. This is a haram type of transaction. You have to take possession. You have to take ownership of something and then sell it. You cannot act like this unless you're a middleman and you're a broker, and the buyer knows this, that you are not taking the money, you're just taking the fee. But if you cannot take all the money, and then when the transaction is complete, that's when you go buy the commodity and then send it to the buyer. This is haram. So you're absolutely right. All these things keep coming up, and we're barely able to catch up with the young people and their creative ways, of making money. It's like, this is just buying and selling. It's jackets and knives and pens. This is not drugs. I was like, sure, but it's not the right type of transaction still. Yeah. Yes? Thanks, Nathan.
Couple of questions. I actually have a quick follow-up on that. What if the seller doesn't, sometimes they don't sell directly to the public because they sell to like contractors or,
Sure.
and
So they sold to you and you paid for it?
well, so like,
So you have to pay for it first.
oh, the middleman has to pay for it.
The middleman has to pay for it first. You don't need to take possession of it. It can stay with the seller as long as you've already paid for it. It's yours. It's just still in their warehouse. Then that would not be gharar. That would be okay.
It has to be a reverse way of like.
Yeah, the order has to be reversed. Yes.
And then one of the questions I have, so if women are earning, are they responsible for their own zakat? And then also with the gold, like, does putting the gold on have to be meaningful, like, or is it just like taking it out and putting it on once a year? Like you didn't, the gold.
Oh my God. The year expires tomorrow. I'm going to wear all my gold today.
With the intention of being an investment, maybe it was
Yes.
wedding gifts and things like that, but you just.
So I think then the approach here should be, ask yourself, if you're not using it, if 1 year has passed and you did not wear it once, then why did you have it? Sure, then pay zakah on it. And what if the gift was cash and it is sitting in a savings account for over a year? Does that make it any less liable? And so we treat gold the same way. So yes, when I got it as a gift or I bought it for the intention of wearing it, but if 1 year has passed and I don't wear it, this is not the fault of the poor. The poor is entitled to a part of that wealth, so we give it. So yes, don't make it into a fake thing and, okay, I really have to wear some gold. So just make an honest assessment and maybe pace yourself out, even if you wear it once, even if you wear it at home, by the way. for your husband, for your kids. Like it doesn't have to be like for a party, but at least it was used for the intention, for the purpose for which it was purchased or acquired. Otherwise, it would be liable. Of course, Abu Hanifa would disagree with all of this. Abu Hanifa says gold is liable, period. I don't care if you wear it. So a lot of South Asians, they struggle with this. I think that's when Indians and Pakistanis become Shafi'i all of a sudden, I think, on this particular matter. Yes.
Can you just repeat what you said about if you have property and you have tenant or you don't have a tenant? First, I understood that if you have tenant and he pays, you don't pay zakat on it? Is this what I understood?
So if you have tenant, let's say that you do Airbnb or you have a full-time tenant in your property, so you pay zakat on the income that comes from the usage and not the value of the asset itself. So if you bought a house for 600,000, you don't need to pay zakat on the 600,000, you need to pay zakat on the 5,000 a month that come in, and all the other rules apply, nisab and one hijri year and all of that stuff.
My husband and I, we were paying for actually.
So don't get him in trouble now.
No, we did pay. So Marwa, the nun from Egypt, she told us no, you only pay for what tenant pay. We didn't know. But alhamdulillah anyway.
Yeah. It was, yes.
I have the other question.
Mm-hmm.
If a woman is earning, like if she
Yes. Yeah, if a woman earns her own income, then all the rules of zakah would apply to her wealth, which is one hijri year needs to have already passed, and it needs to have exceeded the nisab, which is like 80 grams of gold at market value. Yes.
So the layperson who doesn't have a lot of knowledge, if you want to start learning about what's like the drop shipping, because I wouldn't have even known about it. And I know some of my kids are playing around with that, so now I'm going to.
Yeah, me too.
So where do we start? Do we start with the books that you said? Is that like layperson friendly to do?
Yeah, so I think that knowledge is not one place where I go, knowledge is not Costco, where I'm just going to go do my shopping and leave. Knowledge is being on the lookout for gems every day. From the khutbah.
For the gym this morning.
Was it a gem? I hope it.
I got to stop.
Azim. You're always on the lookout for those things, for tafseerah, and then follow up with another question. Give me a resource, give me a website. What else do I need to read? Right? I think that is the approach, and it's an everyday thing.
Start with the blogging, would you recommend?
Yeah. So look for Joe Bradford.
Okay.
Online. He's a Muslim scholar. He's a really amazing guy. I'm hoping, inshallah, that I'll invite him to Sacramento soon. He has his own website and he focuses on a lot of financial stuff. So you're going to find a lot of information on his website on this particular matter. Virtual Mosque is another really great website. This is Imam Suhaib's website, and they have a lot of resources on financial questions, tons. So go read, get exposed, ask more questions, until the ideas become clear in your mind. And perhaps we need to have a weekend workshop on financial literacy.
I would say one more than that. If we look at the 5 pillars of Islam
Mm-hmm.
and how many months we have in our Islamic calendar, we look at Ramadan and we take care of Ramadan. We look at Hajj, we take care of Hajj.
Sure.
Maybe we could give a month to each of the pillars. Because sometimes if it's just a weekend and you're working and you can't get to it, if it's a month and some of the themes are for the older, some are for the younger, the youth, and we dedicate that month to that pillar. The way the Americans have, this is,
This month and that month and
we do in
yeah, yeah.
Islamic calendar, we do have that.
Yeah.
We have the Ramadan month, we have Hajj, we have some of these things, so maybe we could take some of.
Okay, definitely something to consider there. I appreciate that. Yeah, I will definitely talk to the team, inshallah, about how to address this. Yes?
I guess, every person is going to have a unique situation when it comes to, wealth or things that we own. I think the key is making thinking about zakat an important part of the beginning of any kind of wealth type that you're about to start.
Mm.
Whether it's a have not, you don't, so I don't need to know, I don't personally feel like I need to know the zakat rules for all kinds of things, because that's beyond me. But just, if I'm about to buy a land, just as I'm asking about the cost of the land, where it's located, that's the time for me, I think, okay, I better go ask and look up this at that time, now that I'm gonna be exposed to it.
Right. Agreed. There's obviously so much to learn, and sometimes we don't have the capacity to learn all of it. But then the effort here, I think, has to be, okay, like the brother Ahmed says, I'm going to start this undertaking as I talk to my attorney for compliance, and as I talk to my CPA, for the tax component, and as I talk to my wife for permission. I need to also talk to the imam or the scholar in order to make sure that the zakah, the halal part of it, is also met. I agree with that. That's a great way to put it. And you kind of like, you learn as you go. And so, for example, one brother bought residential lots for development, and he held the lots for like 3 years, and then he started developing them. And he held the houses and he put tenants in them, and now he has like 4 or 5 homes that are fully occupied. So he came in order to ask me about how to give zakah on rent and stuff like that. So one thing led to the other, and the conversation went back to 5 years, and it's like, investigative journalism. I'm like probing in order to get to the bottom of it. And then I realized that he did not pay any zakah the first 4 years when the land was in his possession. And the land was not being used by anyone except just himself. And so, he had to pay back zakah on the value of his lots. When you think about it, it's actually not that much. 2.5% is really not that much. If you own like a $100,000 lot, that's $2,500. And so it is well worth it to just give that and feel clear in your heart. And by the way, you give this after all expenses, after your taxes, and after the weed whacker, and after all of this, that's when you assess the value and pay your zakah. It is well worth it to do this. You'll sleep better. Yes.
I just wonder if, like, for people that want to just declare all our assets and everything to the masjid or to the to the imam or to a zakat person.
Oh boy, that'll be an interesting session right there.
Here's the portfolio, and then you like let people know, okay, like you have this, you owe this, like this, like just like how the government will,
That's what I wanted to say. Yeah. Well, the imam is still not your CPA, right? It's like the imam doesn't have the capacity and the details to understand, every single nitty-gritty. So maybe go to the zakah calculator and see what you can answer on your own. And if there's a couple of items there that require further attention, that's maybe when you ask the imam some detailed questions. Otherwise, I think it'll be too much work.
just like a zakat service. Yeah, but
Yeah. Zakat service, maybe there's that too. Yes?
I like the idea of financial literacy program, but I want to shift the conversation a little bit to this point that came in my mind when you were discussing Prophet, you were discussing the war bounty and no zakah on the war bounty. And then there was an incident of Fadak, where the Prophet ﷺ was gifted this property, but he was using it not necessarily as his personal gain. He was using it as charitable reasons, and there was a lot of charity that was being fulfilled by that piece of land. But then there was inheritance claim from his family on that piece of land, and it was denied by the companions. Do you have anything to say on that?
Right. So you have to separate between two things. Number one, prophets do not leave wealth to be inherited. It's all dedicated to the community. And so it is inconceivable for me that Fatima did not know that. I think these are just weak Shia claims in order to attack, Abu Bakr and Umar and so forth. It's very politicized claims. This is laid out on the Quran with clarity. It's laid out in the Ahadith with clarity that the sons and daughters of prophets cannot inherit wealth from them, right? And so that's one matter. I don't think there was any claims about anything that the Prophet ﷺ owned. Number two, when something is gifted to you, the question becomes, was it gifted to you as a person or was it gifted to you in a different capacity? So, for example, when I signed for this building, when I closed escrow on this building, I signed with my first and last name. But did I sign as Muhammad or did I sign as the Imam who is responsible? He's the one that has the right to sign on behalf of the board. So I signed in that capacity, not in my personal capacity, and therefore I'm not personally liable. It's like the LLC. You're not personally liable. And so if this was gifted to the Prophet ﷺ, it was gifted to him as the head of state, and he used it in that capacity, and his intention was, this goes to Baytul Mal, I am not going to personally benefit from this is going to benefit the Ummah. And so it was not his personal possession as Muhammad, it was his possession as the head of state in that capacity, which means that it's transferable to the next person that occupies that same position, in which case it would be Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Yep. Yes.
Some brothers ask the question about zakat and like how is it paid out? Can it be done once, all at once in a year, or can it be given throughout the year? Any comments on that?
Yes. So the question is how zakat is given once a year or multiple times a year. It depends. So let's say that you have very simple income. Some people, they when they file for taxes, they only file the 1040 and nothing else, right? Because they have just one income, from one W-2, and there's nothing else. Sometimes maybe they have two sources of income. So they own a house and they have W-2 income. Sometimes they have three sources of income. So I know that December I get my W-2 and I get the 1099 for all the rent income. But I also have this other company that I own, and I also get in maybe July or June I get my financial statement. So that's three sources of income. If it's a small number of sources, then it's okay to give zakah on each one individually. So if you get your W-2 in December, then you wait for the following December and see how much money is in that account, and all money that is in excess of nisab becomes liable. And for the money that I earn in July, then I wait until July of next year and so forth. Most of the time, this is not how we earn our income. Like if I look at my own, my tax return is like this thick. So I cannot do that because you own properties and there's money coming in and out every single day. There's stock, there's crypto, you can't. All right? And so what I do and what many scholars recommend is that you just pick one day every year. And you're going to take a comprehensive look at all of your finances on that day, and whatever that is in excess of nisab, you're going to give zakah on that. Now you might say, well, but I just put like $50,000 in the account the day before. Is that going to become liable as well? The answer is yes, because it works both ways. If you took 50,000 out of the account that day before, that's one day less than the hawl, the one full year, then it's not liable. But if you put it the day before, then it becomes liable, and it just fixed that one day, and it works both ways.
Well, that's actually a very important answer to that topic. I guess another way to ask the question is, let's say, okay, whatever it is, either one income or multiple incomes, but I measured my zakah and it's whatever, it's like 1,000 or 10,000. Do I have to pay it all at once, or can I pay it throughout the year? And does that apply? Can I go into the year forward? So that's I think
Needs to be paid as soon as possible. It needs to be paid as soon as possible. Zakah is something you owe. This is like Salat al-Dhuhr. You got to pray Dhuhr before Asr comes. So you have to do your own planning way before the due date. And you know exactly how it's going to be spent and who's going to be receiving. Is it the masjid? Is it the orphanage overseas? And you have to make all these plans. Some people even give it before it becomes due, and then they just transfer the cash from this account to that account.
I find that, I think, yeah, exactly, that's, I think that's the angle of it that people are asking about. That, for example, like one way I heard an answer to that also was like, you can do that with next year's, zakat.
Because now you're doing it in advance.
And write it out. Because
Yes.
you gotta have an idea, especially most of us who have, let's say somebody owns a business, and they know this, they make 200,000 a year, let's say, plus or minus. You can pay zakat ahead, but not delay it.
Right.
So, okay, you paid your zakat from last year, but now instead of waiting till next year, you can start paying it if you don't feel like you could
Absolutely.
all at once.
Absolutely.
I thought that was helpful.
Absolutely. Again, this is you just paying in advance. And paying in advance is okay. But once it gets due, you have to, that day, you want to make sure that it's out. We're going to take one last question because we have to pray Dhuhr, inshallah.
About this brother who didn't pay zakat,
Uh-huh.
you said that he owes, that he was late,
Yes.
because he didn't know. So,
But it's his job to know.
I know.
It's his responsibility to know.
It's still accepted, I mean.
Oh no, inshallah it is accepted. But I think he still made a mistake of not asking those questions while he was acquiring the properties, which I think he should have. All right, inshallah, we're going to pray Salatul Dhuhr in just a couple of minutes. Subhanak Allahumma bihamdik. نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر جزاك الله خير والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله